Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the eve of November 20th, 2023 in the United States, the morning of November 21st, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with a report of the aftermath of October 7th. It was reported today in Israel that 2 weeks ago, 2 Palestinians that had invaded Israel on October 7th were located and arrested in the southern town of Rahat, that is a Bedouin town in the southern parts of Israel. According to the report, one of these was a Hamas operative, and the other was a civilian that entered during the third wave of the invasion. During this wave, thousands of Palestinians just walked over the fence into Israel, either looking for work or simply to see what was going on. Either way, the two were hiding out in an abandoned building. They were arrested, and following this report, the police stated that they are worried that there are other sleeper cells from the invasion of October 7th throughout the south, and they are searching for them. Relating to the hostage situation, there was reported in the Wall Street Journal regarding the brewing deal that is being mediated between Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. According to the report, in the first stage of the deal, Hamas will release 50 women and children that it is holding, that it kidnapped on October 7th, and in turn, Israel will release 50 Palestinian women and children in Israeli jails. The report stated that Israel is categorically refusing to release any Palestinians in Israeli jails that are explicitly affiliated with Hamas. Then there will be a 5-day pause in the fighting, during which in every day, Hamas will release another 10 hostages. Hamas guaranteed, according to this report, that mothers will not be separated from their children. The report did not state what Israel will do during these days, if Israel will presumably be releasing also Palestinian prisoners during these days. That was not included in that report. According to the report also, Hamas is demanding an increase of the entrance of humanitarian aid and specifically fuel to the Gaza Strip, and that Israel cease all aerial activity during the days of pause. Relating to this, in the Lebanese Al-Akhbar newspaper, it was reported today that the United States communicated to the Qatari envoys that the United States will heavily pressure Israel to accept the deal in the coming days, if Qatar in turn pressures Hamas to release more hostages as the days of pause continue. According to Al-Akhbar, also, Hamas is claiming that 5 days is not enough for it to round up all the different hostages, since they are kept in different areas, and some of them are held by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and some of them are held by Hamas. Possibly relating to this, there was a report today of a conversation that was held between the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, and the leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nahalla, regarding coordinating their positions about a hostage exchange. President Biden in the United States today was asked about a brewing deal, and he says that he believes that it is close and will be in the coming days. Moving on to reports regarding the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were substantial rockets and missiles today fired from the Gaza Strip towards the south and central parts of Israel. Rockets targeted in the south the areas of Erez, Yad Mordechai, Sderot, Ashkelon, Nitzan, Shtulim, and Ashdod, where there have not been fires for 10 days. Rockets targeted them today. In addition, sirens and alarm bells went off across the entire central areas of Israel, Gush Dan and the Shfela, because even though only 2 rockets were launched to the area, there was a fear that fragments from these rockets had exploded in the air, and the shrapnel would fall throughout the central parts of Israel. So there were alarms that went off in the Sharon, the Lachish, Tel Aviv, and there was a direct hit of some fragments in the Chulon area. Relating to the Gaza Strip specifically, there was substantial IDF activity reported today around the Indonesian hospital in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Wafa news agency stated that the IDF has deployed snipers and tanks are besieging the hospital, and Al Jazeera published photos that substantiated that tanks are surrounding the hospital area. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the Red Cross is attempting to coordinate the evacuation of the hospital. However, they stated that the IDF has not allowed any safe corridor to evacuate. The report included there are several deaths in the hospital from shelling already, and that 200 people have managed to flee from the hospital in the last 24 hours. According to the IDF spokesperson today, there's substantial fighting going on in the Zaytun area, and specifically the IDF is engaging the Zaytun Brigade of Hamas in Gaza City, and that the IDF has uncovered weapons labs and rocket caches that Hamas had kept in different mosques throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. There was also a report that the IDF managed to assassinate 3 different Hamas platoon commanders, although their names were not released in the last 24 hours. In addition, Al Jazeera in the last several hours reported of intensive bombing that is going on in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as attacks that are going on in Khan Yunis, which is the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, where lots of Palestinians have evacuated, and where it is also reported that likely Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and Muhammad Def, the leader of the Al-Qassam brigades in the Gaza Strip, have fled. Regarding casualties, 3 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the last 24 hours. This brings a total of 66 IDF soldiers that have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began. According to reports, the Palestinian Health Ministry is stating the number of killed at 13,300. Among them, 5,600 are minors. However, as I've stated in the last several days, it continues to be the case that the Palestinian Health Ministry is not channeling their reports through the usual channels. The official UN reports from the Palestinian Health Ministry state that they have not had a report from the Palestinian Health Ministry already in over a week as a result of the collapse of different communications arrays. Different news agencies are reporting that this is the number that the Palestinian Health Ministry is stating. However, again, regarding official sources, that the way the Palestinian Health Ministry usually channels its numbers, no reports are being made in over a week. Different reports also state that there are currently upwards of 6,500 Palestinians who are considered missing, buried under the different rubbles of the bombings. Many of these are presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, there was a report today that, accompanied by IDF medical staff, all the preemie babies that had been evacuated from Al-Shifa Hospital have officially left the Gaza Strip. They evacuated to Egypt, 2 different hospitals, primarily in El Arish. According to a report in CNN, officials from the World Health Organization stated that some of these preemie babies are in critical conditions due to infections that resulted from the conditions in the Al-Shifa Hospital. In addition, amidst reports that the IDF put out several days ago that there's evidence that Israeli hostages were held both in Shifa Hospital and in Ratisi Hospital, there was a video released today showing that as thousands of Palestinians continued to evacuate down south through the Salahadin area, IDF soldiers were standing along the corridors and were calling out through loudspeakers in Hebrew, saying, and I quote, "If any child here speaks Hebrew, if any child here has been taken from their home in Israel, come running up to us, do not be afraid." So this substantiates that the IDF suspects that hostages may still be somewhere in the north and may be being transferred down south in these convoys, and they are specifically calling out the children, saying if anyone here is being taken against their will, was kidnapped from Israel, come running up to us. In addition, following reports that they gave several days ago that Jordan is going to establish a field hospital in the Gaza Strip coordinated with Israel, 40 trucks today carrying medical supplies, equipment, as well as staff entered the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. They are going to a designated place in Khan Yunis. According to the report, once all the trucks, including additional ones that will arrive in the coming days, will make it to their destination, they are going to establish a field hospital in the Khan Yunis area within the next 48 hours. In addition, UNRWA was reporting today that there are upwards of 1.7 million internally displaced people in the Gaza Strip, and that a lot of these have little access to clean water, and that UNRWA is officially starting to put out warnings that there is fear of an outbreak of cholera in the different internally displaced people's areas. In addition, White House spokesperson today, Matthew Miller, stated in a briefing that Israel, before it commences any ground invasion in the Gaza Strip, must answer humanitarian questions. He specifically stated, and I'm quoting, "Not only about the aid workers, but also about civilians, particularly those whom Israel warned have to leave the north and have gone south, and are now fearful that they will be targeted in the second stage of the operation. Israel must give answers. Where can civilians in the south of the Gaza Strip be safe?" So this again relates to reports that Israel is planning its invasion of the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and the White House is increasingly concerned, so where are civilians now going to evacuate? Relating to humanitarian aid trucks, 2 trucks carrying a total of 67,000 liters of fuel entered the Gaza Strip today. This is according to the deal that was struck between Israel and UNRWA. In addition, it was reported that 51 trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies entered the Gaza Strip, and also that yesterday, while reported there were 60 to 70 trucks, a total of over 100 trucks did manage to enter by day's end. Moving on to the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity today reported in the Wadi Farah area, including confrontations with several Palestinians who were injured. There was also a report that 1 Palestinian was killed in a confrontation with the IDF in the El Arub area near Hebron. A total of 16 Palestinians were arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. These include Tariq Abdallah Ahmed Salam, who is a senior in Hamas, who was located in Bethlehem. In addition, it was reported today that 2 Jewish yeshiva students from Jerusalem have been indicted in Israel for charges of throwing Molotov cocktails at Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem and parts of the West Bank, as well as attacking different government building and infrastructure in Jerusalem. Moving on to the north of Israel, so it was a very intensive day in the last 24 hours. Rockets and missiles were reported in a coordinated attack of Hezbollah. Some of these targeted the Misgav Am in the Upper Galilee. Some of these targeted Kiryat Shmona, Margaliot, and Shulam in Western Galilee. There was a specific barrage of 25 rockets that came accompanied with 3 attack drones that crashed into different IDF outposts. There were also reports that mortar fires landed in the Biranit base, which houses the headquarters of the IDF's Galilee division, that caused substantial damage, and that a fire broke out in that base. Hezbollah claimed responsibility for these different attacks. And finally, there was an obscure report about a drone that had entered the Upper Galilee, and then the IDF put out a statement that that suspicion has ended without any injuries. Unclear what exactly happened there. The IDF retaliated to all these attacks with substantial bombardments. There were attacks with warplanes, helicopters, as well as artillery that targeted Hezbollah's headquarters, infrastructure, as well as a unit near the Metula area on the border. According to the El Manar network that belongs to Hezbollah, there were also substantial IDF retaliations in the El Ramish area and in the Ita al-Shabaab area in Lebanon. Hezbollah announced today the death of another one of its activists in these retaliations, bringing the total deaths of Hezbollah since the war began to 77. Moving on to some of the regional developments, a lot of these relate to the hijacking of a ship by the Houthi rebels yesterday that they believe belonged to Israel. The ship belongs to a company, part of which is owned by an Israeli. There were no Israelis on board. According to the former head of research division in the Mossad, as equivalent to Israel's CIA, Iran is trying to save Hamas before it is destroyed, and thus it is activating its militias across the Middle East and specifically calling on the Houthis to intensify its activities. According to other reports, 2 more ships that are owned by the same company of the ship that was hijacked changed their course in the last 24 hours in order to avoid the region. The Hezbollah Al-Manar network put out a movie today published by the Houthi rebels in which they show them landing from helicopters and taking over the ship. In addition, the White House spokesperson Matthew Miller stated that the ship hijacking is a blatant violation of international law and that the U.S. demands the release of the ship and its crew immediately. Japan, who operates the hijacked ship, reported that it is negotiating the release of the ship and of its crew. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that occurred, the president of the Red Cross today met with the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Qatar, and demanded that Hamas allow the Red Cross visit the hostages. The Red Cross stated, and I'm quoting, "The Red Cross calls for the immediate release of those abducted and to allow our staff to meet with them, transfer them medical supplies, and allow them to communicate with their families." No report was made from Hamas regarding the results of this meeting. In addition, Bezalel Smotrich, who is Israel's finance minister and one of the more hawkish figures in Israel's government, today again stated that he voted against the possibility of allowing fuel into the Gaza Strip, that this is a mistake, and that he demands the expansion of the war cabinet in order to allow, presumably him, and other members from different hawkish parties into this decision-making cabinet. In addition, a different hawkish party in Israel's government today, Jewish Power, tried to push forth its law that had been tabled about 8 months ago, calling for, I'm quoting, death penalty for terrorists. According to this law, the different courts in Israel will be required to sentence people who are convicted of terrorism, specifically against the Jewish people, to death, and they are trying to put forth this law in the aftermath of October 7th. Families of the different hostages burst into the Knesset committee meeting today, demanding that this law not be put forth and stating explicitly that it's going to endanger their family members and loved ones who are being held by Hamas. There was a shouting match that was reported and videoed in the Knesset. The Likud party eventually announced that this law will not be put forth for now, and Minister Gantz, who's part of the war cabinet, heavily denounced Jewish Power for initiating this law at this time. In addition, after the Joint Arab and Islamic Conference established a week ago a committee that will travel the world in order to apply pressure on different governments to, in turn, apply pressure on Israel to accept a ceasefire, a committee of foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority arrived in China today as their first stop. There they met with the foreign ministry in China. Tomorrow they are reported heading to Russia in order to continue their international mission. An additional National Security Council in the United States today stated in regard to the statement of the Palestinian Authority yesterday that Hamas did not carry out the massacre at the Nova Party in Israel. They stated, and I quote, "That statement does not respect the families and loved ones of those who lost their lives in the horrendous terror attack of Hamas on October 7th. We understand the Palestinian Authority has removed it from its websites and are happy the Palestinian Authority clarified that this is not its official position." So this statement really embarrassed the United States because it is calling on the Palestinian Authority to be reinstated into the Gaza Strip. Palestinian Authority eventually retracted that statement. This was now put out today by the National Security Council in the United States. In addition, the IDF spokesperson today stated that the IDF military is beginning to release some of the reserve soldiers that it called up initially in the aftermath of October 7th that are not on the front lines, and this is being done according to different assessments of how the war is progressing. So the IDF after October 7th amassed the largest army it has ever amassed. Reports had over 350,000 soldiers that had been called up. Some of them are now starting to be released based on different intelligence reports of where the war is heading. In addition, responding to international criticism, the Netanyahu spokesperson stated that the IDF shooting in the Indonesian hospital was done in accordance with international law, that Hamas is using the hospitals as military sites, and that Israel follows international law in weighing each attack that it carries out, the necessity of it in response to what may be collateral damage. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.